welcome. I guess it's evening where you are, it's morning where we are. And as Jen said, my son is going to be arriving home off the bus in about 30 minutes. I've warned him that I'm in the middle of a presentation. Let's see if he remembers that. So that'll be a fun little interruption. My name is Lucinda Snyder, and I am the financial aid counselor for our international students at the University of Rochester. So I'm going to be talking about the aid, and then I'll let Jen introduce herself.
Hi everyone, my name is Jennifer Blask. I'm the Executive Director of International Admissions at the University of Rochester, which is located in Rochester, New York. Lucinda and I work together through the admission process for students. I'm going to go ahead and just mute that student real quick. There we go. Our plan is to present some information from you, but also to answer your questions. You can feel free to ask questions at any point with the chat, but we will plan to kind of keep those questions more to the end. And I think we're going to plan to talk with you about financial aid and admissions. So how Lucinda and I work together and how financial aid impacts admissions, vice versa, and then also preparing for the CSS profile, which is what you'll fill out to apply for financial aid at many, many institutions in the United States.
So before we jump in, Jen, I'm going to let my ginormous dog outside because he likes to contribute to the presentation. So
Sounds great.
hold that. Come on, outside. Are you gonna lay?
This is what happens with working from home. We all just have to be flexible. Hopefully you won't see a cat, all of a sudden walking across the screen from my house. So that's what's going on here. Here comes Lucinda.
Life of remote working, and
that's right. We're just flexible.
My dog likes to be very emphatic and help me punctuate my points, but he's a little loud. So let's get this show rolling, shall we? All right, here we go. So the first thing we want to talk about really is how we delineate international students when it comes to admissions and aid. So if you are either an eligible non-citizen, that's somebody who is a permanent US resident. So you have gone through the process, you have a change of status, you have a green card, and not a green card to work, but a green card that says that you are a permanent resident, and therefore you are eligible for federal funds from the US government. You can also be a conditional permanent resident, or you can have refugee or asylum granted. So there's a bunch of different statuses that kind of fall into an eligible non-citizen. And so if you were one of those, you would be eligible for federal aid, and you would be considered a domestic student in terms of both financial aid and admissions. So an international student is someone who requires a visa to attend school in the US. So you need an F1 visa. It is based on citizenship, okay? So if you happen to go to a boarding school in the United States, that doesn't mean you're an eligible non-citizen. You're still an international student because you still need an F1 visa to attend school. Also, if you have an undocumented status, for the purposes of us, even though you may have been born in the US, lived in the US your entire life, you are still considered an international student. So what does this mean, and how do you apply for aid? So that means that you're eligible for not federal funds, but for institutional financial aid, which means money from the University of Rochester in this case. And so you will fill out the CSS profile, and it will guide you through questions that are appropriate for an international student based on your citizenship.
So two terms that you're often going to hear admissions and financial aid staff use is talking about need-based aid and merit scholarships. And it's important to understand the difference between those two things. So first, need-based financial aid is based on your family's finances. So this has to do with, how much income do your parents earn? Do they own their own home? Do they own a business? What assets do they have? All of the things that kind of make up your family's financial situation. You must indicate on the common application or the coalition application, whichever application you use, that you're intending to apply for aid, and you have to submit the additional forms, which you've already heard Lucinda mention, the CSS profile, to apply for that aid. And some schools might do it a little bit differently. Some schools might have alternative forms, like you'll sometimes hear about an international student financial aid application. And some schools might have their own form, but essentially you've got to fill out additional forms so the school can understand what your family's financial situation is. Versus merit scholarships, which are based on you. What have you done in high school or in college if you're looking to transfer? What are your grades like? If you're submitting test scores, what are those like? What did you have to say in your essay? Those sorts of things. It has nothing to do with your family's financial situation. So you could receive a merit scholarship whether your parents are billionaires or you're very impoverished or somewhere in the middle. At some schools, like Rochester, you might automatically be considered for them. So we automatically consider students for merit scholarships when they apply. At other schools, you may have to fill out additional scholarship applications. So you always want to look at what those differences are and understand kind of these two separate pools of money of need-based financial aid and merit scholarships. Though they often work together, we have many students at Rochester that will receive a merit scholarship and need-based aid because they needed aid to come to Rochester, but they were also really strong students, so we wanted to recognize and award that.
All right, so as Jen said, applying for aid is part of your admissions application, and that's because at the University of Rochester, we are what we call need aware in terms of international students. So that means we have a budget. I wish, and Jen wishes too, that we had an unlimited amount of funds, that I had this money tree and I could give everybody all of the money to come here. But if I did that, I would lose my job. So we have to know how much money that we're spending on each person that we admit for each incoming class. So it is really, really important. And if you don't take anything away from this today, there's a couple of points. And one of them is that if you think that you are interested in need-based aid, meaning you need help to pay for the cost of attendance, please make sure that you indicate that on the common application and understand that it's part of your application for admissions. It's very difficult, almost impossible, if you say that you're not interested in aid and then become admitted to then come back and request aid. So it's really, really important. Even if you say that you're interested and then decide that your family can pay for the cost of attendance, that's fine. We would rather know that up front and that you don't need the aid rather than you are admitted and then you can't come because we can't give you financial aid. It's also important to know that not all colleges offer need-based financial aid to international students. So as you're doing your research, if you're comparing schools, that's something that you want to really kind of dig into and find out. As Jen mentioned, the CSS profile is required for us, and some schools will require the International Student Financial Aid application. We do not accept that. So we require all students to submit the CSS profile via the College Board, and the College Board is the organization that puts on the SATs. And so you will go to their website, you'll complete the application and then use our code, which is 2928, and that will show up magically in our system, and we'll be able to look at your information. So a lot of schools also have this tool called the Net Price Calculator or My Intuition. And so a lot of students will try to put in their information and get an estimate of how much it's going to cost to attend the university. Unfortunately for international students, this tool does not work. And the reason being, there are too many factors that go into determining need and aid for international students. Now, That being said, if you live in the United States with your parents, but you are not a permanent resident, but they are here on a work visa, and they file US taxes, you could input that information and get an estimate of what your aid could potentially look like. Again, it's an estimate and it's entirely dependent on how accurate you are at inputting the information. The net price calculator is very detailed, and my intuition gives you a range. But if you do not fall into the category of living in the US with your parents and then filing US taxes, this tool is not going to work for you. So I think that's really important to recognize.
Two other terms that you'll often hear is need aware and need blind. So what need aware is that when we're reviewing your admissions application, we're aware that you have financial need and you've applied for financial aid, and that may be a factor in our admissions decision. So Lucinda shared that we have, a financial aid budget, and because we have a budget, we need to be aware of what the cost is if we choose to admit you, because we don't want to admit someone and then not give them funding to attend our institution. Some schools might choose to do that and have you look for outside scholarships, but basically we're understanding, along with your grades and your letters of recommendation and your essay, we're also understanding what your financial need is. You'll find other schools that are need blind, which means that as we're reviewing your application, we don't know what your financial aid status is. We don't know if you've, how much aid you've applied, if you've applied for aid and how much aid you would need if you come to our school. We're just making our admissions decisions based on your information you've supplied us with. Now, it's not totally true, because we can look and see in your application that what you shared that your parents' jobs are or where you live, right? So it is possible that we could still have a sense of how much money your family might have, but it's just a guess at that point. We're not looking at this person needs X number of dollars in the way that we are if a school is need aware. So that's another important thing to look at as you're looking at schools. You'll hear need aware versus need blind. And often people think need blind, that's what I want. Need blind is better always because they're not looking at my need. But what you need to understand comes into the next piece, which is demonstrated need. And Lucinda's going to talk a little bit about how these things play together.
Right. So demonstrated need is, once we look at the information from the CSS profile, it tells us how much aid you actually need. And the wonderful thing about the University of Rochester, and I think Jen will agree with me in that we're very fortunate, is that we meet 100% of demonstrated need. So if we admit you and you have need, we're going to give you the money, all of the money that you need to attend. Now, sometimes our estimation or our calculation of demonstrated need is very different than a family's, and I think that's really important to understand. So how do we come up with that? So it's called the estimated family contribution, and again, it's based on your family's finances. So we look at income, we look at assets, and we look at the number in the household and the number in college. So these are the factors that determine a family's ability to pay. And then we take that and we subtract it from the overall cost of attendance. So that means the total amount of money that it costs to come to the university. And we subtract out that estimated family contribution. And what's left over is your need. And we're going to fill that with grants and scholarships and a university loan that we offer for international students. So very few students are need blind and meet need. Because again, we have a budget, and so we have to know how much we're going to spend on each student that's coming in. So if we were need blind, we would have an unlimited amount of money, and it didn't matter how much we spent. So if a school is need blind, oftentimes they are not meeting your need, and you're going to have to find other sources of funding.
So it's important to understand how your demonstrated need might have an impact on admissions. As you've heard, at Rochester and at frankly every school, institutional aid is limited, right? Some schools will have a smaller or a larger budget than everywhere, but everyone has a budget, just like we all have budgets as people. And so as a result, gaining admission may be competitive, particularly if you need more aid. I often talk about, right, if you just use round numbers, if we have $1 million to give out, right, and you need $80,000 to attend, and 4 other students each need $20,000 to attend, I can admit 4 of them or 1 of you. So in order for me to admit the 1 of you who needs $80,000, boy, you've got to be awesome, right? Because I'm making a really big investment in you. And if you think about maybe like a bank loan, if you're going to a bank and you need a really big loan, the bank wants to be really sure about that investment that they're making, right? Versus if they're just giving you a very small loan, maybe it's okay if it's a little bit riskier because it's not very much money. So it's the same thing, that if we're going to make a really big investment in a student, that student's got to look really strong and be really competitive in our process. If you cannot afford the full cost of attendance at any school, you must apply for aid. So at Rochester and at many schools, we essentially ask our international students to make a choice at the point of application. You either say, I can afford the whole cost of attendance, and I'm going to fill out a form, and I'm going to pledge that my family doesn't need any money. If we get a merit scholarship, fantastic. That means we have to pay less, but if we don't, that's okay. We've got the money to cover it. Or you're going to fill out another form, the CSS profile, and say, yes, I need aid. Here's all my financial information. And if you admit me, you're going to know that you need to spend this on me in order to help me come. It's something to think about if you're thinking about early decision. Because with early decision being a binding process, you are telling a school that if I'm admitted, I will come. And so sometimes that's not a great option for a student who is concerned about money, that wants to kind of see what different schools are going to offer in packages, which you can do through regular decision. You can get those packages from each school you're admitted to and then kind of make your decision. But on the other hand, applying early decision can be really helpful at schools. So sometimes students feel kind of stuck between this, I'm really worried about money, but I also really want to get in. What should I do? And this is where you really want to talk to each individual school and understand what is their recommendation for students that are in this situation. At a place like Rochester, you know, I think each individual circumstance is different. For students, it can be tough to apply early decision if you need some funding, if we don't think you need that same funding. So this is what Lucinda was talking a little bit about with demonstrated need. You might say, I think I need $40,000. We might look at all your financial information and say, we think you only need $30,000, right? And so you want to really think about, what's kind of the best move for you here and talk with an individual school. That's a conversation I'm happy to have, with any student about what might be the best choice for them. And then ultimately, you need to decide what's the best choice for you. So we've talked a lot about what the CSS profile is, and now we're going to dig in a little bit deeper into what exactly is this form and what goes into filling it out.
All right, so the CSS profile actually is available today. So October 1st is this magical date in financial aid, and where all the applications for the next academic year become available to students to start that process. So it is much like the Common App in that it's the financial aid application that's used to help colleges and universities determine a family's need. And I think it's really important as you're looking at colleges to know that not every institution is going to require the CSS profile. So you don't want to, much like the SAT score, right? You don't want to send it to every single college that you're applying to. You want to make sure that a school actually needs it. And typically it is a private institution who has institutional funds to give to students that are going to require the CSS profile. And it's really a deep dive into a family's financial situation. It is also a way to look and evaluate a family on an even playing field, right? So my job is really to advocate for students and families and help them make the University of Rochester affordable. That's my primary job. My second job, though, is to be a good steward of the institution's money. And this is a way in which we do that, because it evaluates every single student, whether you're domestic or international, in the same manner. So even though we're not comparing apples to apples, so to speak, we are, because we're looking at the same types of information. All right, so what's really important for you, this is another one of those takeaways that if you don't take away anything else, I want you to remember this, right? Is that it allows you to report your financial information in your home currency. And this is extremely important to make sure that when we send you a financial aid package, we're going out with the best financial aid package that we can. So the CSS profile is smart, and so you're going to say what country you're from, what currency your parents earn in, and you're going to report it in that currency. Don't do the calculation for us and convert it to US dollars. And the reason for this is that we use one currency rate per academic year per country. And it's established by College Board, and they do the research so that there is an average exchange rate for each year. So we're looking at 2019 income for the 21-22 academic year. So they're going to find the sort of median exchange rate for that currency for 2019, and that's what we're going to use. And we're going to use that across the board for all students from that country. And similarly, any other school that's using the CSS profile is going to use that same currency rate. So again, there's some equity across the board. It also adapts questions to be more appropriate to non-US students. So it's got skip logic in it, and it's going to, some of the things that we use in the US, we know that you don't always use in other countries. And so it's going to adapt the questions to account for that. All right, so there is a cost to the CSS profile. So this is why I said you don't want to blindly fill it out and send it to every college that you think that you're going to apply to. The cost is $25 for the application for the first, and then it's an additional $16 per college selected. So payment is in US dollars, and it has to be done with a credit card. There is a section on the profile website about fee waivers. But automatic fee waivers are not available for international students. But don't panic. We do give out fee waivers for individual students. And so what happens is we as a university have to buy those fee waivers. You will need to contact either Jen or myself to request a fee waiver, and then we will get that to you. Now, you have to actually complete and submit your common application before we're going to give out those fee waivers. Why is that? Well, we don't want to spend money on you if you're not going to actually submit an application, because it does cost money. And for example, we gave out 600 fee waivers last year. So you guys can do the math to figure out how much we spent. We believe in making the U of R affordable and accessible to families of all sort of financial means, but we do want to make sure that you're invested in us and applying to us. So once you've submitted that common app, email myself or Jen or the general email for admissions, and they will get it to me, and then I will get you a fee waiver code. All right, so some common mistakes that happen when people are filling out the profile is that selecting a citizenship status of eligible non-citizen. My son just gave me an update on where he was heading. So he did a really good job, guys. He was quiet when he came in the house. So you don't, again, remember, you're not an eligible non-citizen. In order to fall into that category, you need to have a permanent residency or be a permanent resident of the US. So you need to select international, and then it's going to then trickle down and ask you the appropriate questions. So if you report a mailing address that is not your home address, so for example, if you went to a boarding school in a country that was not where your parents lived, that gets a little tricky in terms of our need analysis and figuring out the questions that are then asked. So you're going to want to report your mailing address as your mailing address, and your permanent address is where your parents live, where that home structure is. Again, I've already said this, and I kind of beat this point to an extreme sometimes. So please, please, please report in US dollar, or don't report in US dollars, report in your home currency. And it's going to ask you to select a tax return. If you don't have to file, you say not required to file. But then they're just going to give you some other options, and you want to make sure that you select other non-US tax return. The other options are US tax returns. And again, because the CSS profile is smart and it has skip logic, if you select the incorrect tax return, it's going to ask you questions that are assuming that you're a US citizen and that you filled out a US tax return. And this is kind of an interesting one. So selecting the incorrect application year. So when you log on, starting today, it's going to say for 2019, 2020, and then 2021, 2022. You want to make sure that you select 21, 22, even though we're still in the 1920 or the 2021 academic year, right? You want to make sure that you select that correct application year, because it's asking 2 years prior information. So if you select the wrong year, it's going to select the wrong taxes, and we're not going to find it. All right. Divorced and separated families. So what if you say, you're like, okay, great, all of that makes sense, but my parents don't live together. My parents are separated, or they're divorced. Colleges require the CSS profile from both biological parents. So we are going to request, even if you live with mom, we're going to request that dad complete what is called a non-custodial parent profile. They will need to set up an account with the College Board and then complete the CSS profile. And the reason that we do this, again, is to be fair and equitable. We want to see an entire family's financial picture so that we can appropriately and equitably determine aid. Now, you may not know that non-custodial parent. You may not have contact. There may be another reason why you are unable to get that information. And at that point, you really want to reach out directly to me, and I will walk you through the process of waiving the non-custodial parent profile. There is a form, there is some information that we're going to require, documentation, a letter from a third-party non-biased person. But if there is a reason why that can't happen, other than my parent just doesn't want to contribute, or that was the agreement, we usually can work through that process, and that's going to be an individual thing. And you will have to reach out to me to get that form. Jen, am I forgetting anything at that point?
No, that's great.
Okay. So this here is what is going to look like when you go to the CSS Profile website. So you're going to see here this, it's going to say fee waivers right there. There's a tab right up at the top. You're not going to click that, because remember, you're going to need to reach out to us directly to get that fee waiver, and it's going to be a specific code assigned to the U of R, and we're going to give that to you. There is a tab for international applicants. There is a great video and tutorial that's going to walk you through kind of step by step what you need to fill out. And then there's the divorced and separated families tab. So there's going to be more information on how to kind of complete that profile and set up that NCP profile account. All right. I feel like we've thrown a lot of information at you. I feel like I'm forgetting a couple of things, but let's kind of peek at the chat and open it up for questions, and maybe that'll trigger some of my thoughts. I'm on my, I don't know, third presentation on Aid this week, so I feel like I can't remember if I've said the right things or the things that
did I say that yesterday, today? Yeah.
Which one was it?
So please talk more.
Can you talk more about the documents that students will need to upload to iDoc? You know, like statement of earnings. How does it look? Because like in our countries, it might be something different. And the difference between bank statement and bank letter, this kind of stuff.
Okay. So we do not require any documents, okay? So the only thing that we are requiring of students is the CSS profile. IDOC is primarily for US citizens because we require a tax return, okay? So the only time you're gonna need to submit further documentation, either a bank statement or a wage statement or an earnings certificate or a tax return, is if I start to analyze the file and something doesn't make sense to me, okay? So I review every single financial aid application for international students. And the reason that we don't require all of those documents is because there is one of me, and we have a lot of international students from a lot of different countries, and I don't have the knowledge to be able to analyze all of those tax statements, or do I have the time to do that, right? So really it is, we're trusting that you're gonna take that information, transcribe it into the CSS profile. If something looks off to me, or I need more clarification, or there's one too many zeros, then yes, I'm gonna reach out to you directly and say, I need you to send me a 2019 tax return or a wage statement or a certificate of earnings. So you do not need to worry about submitting documents to IDOC.
We've got a few questions here in the chat. I'm going to start with there's some admissions questions, which we can maybe get to in a minute if we've got time. Concerning financial aid, so here's a common question that we get. It's about what is the average financial aid for international students? And I don't know if Lucinda has an exact answer, but I think that any answer is not helpful to you, right? Correct. So even if I give you a magical number that is actually, when we put everybody together, this is the average package, it's really not helpful for you to know that because it's so individualized to each student. We have many, many students on our campus that receive no financial aid at all. They didn't apply for financial aid when they applied to the university, or they didn't qualify for financial aid because their family did not need it in order for them to attend the university. We then have other students at the other end of the spectrum that have a full package. We've had that question. Do you provide full packages? We do, but those are for students that are from extremely impoverished backgrounds that need a full package to attend the university. And we're so spectacular that we want to make that large investment in them. The vast majority of our students are somewhere in between. Their families can provide some funding, but not the full funding. And so it doesn't really help us if I tell you the average package is X dollars, because you might not get anywhere close to that, or you might get more than that. It's really all about what you as an individual student need. And you have to remember that that need may impact your admissions decision. The more need you need, the more money you need. I'll be very honest, as the person who oversees the admissions process, the more challenging it is for us to admit you because we have a budget. So you want to bear that in mind. Lucinda, is that good? Anything you want to add there?
Yeah, I mean, I just want to, I want to reiterate that, that, you know, we have a large number of international students on our campus. And in fact, not one student has the same financial aid package. So of all of the students on campus, of the 5,000 undergrad students, of those that have financial aid packages, domestic or international, nobody has the exact same financial aid package because we do such a good job at looking at each family's financial situation. So again, I'm going to reiterate what Jen said, that it's not helpful to tell you what sort of the average aid package is. And I will also say that I am very, very confident that our process works, that, you know, we put together aid packages for international students, for hundreds of them every single year, and the formula works. And so I'm very confident, you know, when people are saying, well, what's a full package? Well, we are meeting your full demonstrated needs. So from where I sit, right, we're giving you a full package because we're meeting your demonstrated need. Now, I think a lot of students mean, I don't want to pay for anything. And there are very, very, very few students who do not pay anything to attend the university. And that's just being very, like, very honest about that, right, Jen? Like, that you have to be like a very, very exceptional student to not have to pay anything. But we do meet full demonstrated needs. So if you have a need, we're going to meet it.
So we have gotten a number of admissions questions. So I'm actually going to share with you a website in the chat and also advance here and show you guys a slide. We have lots of admissions specific sessions. So I just included the website where you can sign up for those in the chat. You'll see all sorts of virtual sessions throughout the month of October. Later in October, we'll put all of our November sessions up. If you look on this slide, the sessions on the left, the College Admissions Workshop Series, those are general to the admissions process. So if you'd like to learn more about writing an essay for the U.S. college application process, we have an hour-long workshop on just the essay. We have an hour-long workshop on interviewing and what that's going to be like and how to best prepare for that. So they're not specific to Rochester, though we do use Rochester examples. They're really to help you as you're applying to anywhere in the US. And then the sessions on the right are the Rochester Workshop Series. These are just a few examples that we have. If you would like to learn more about Rochester in general, we actually offer information sessions 3 days a week and multiple times for different time zones. If you'd like to learn more about the city of Rochester or research universities or interact with some of our current students, we offer those types of sessions. So I know we have quite a few questions about admissions, and I would really encourage you to attend one of these additional sessions that we offer. If you go to that same website I shared, there's also a section where you can see regional events, and we have a bunch of sessions that are geared towards international students. So lots of different things that you can engage in.
Jen, there's a question about early decision and financial aid. So I think that's an important piece for us to talk about, right? So
please.
this is a joint one, right? We're going to provide a united.
That's right.
So as Jen mentioned, right, early decision is a binding agreement. So you are committing to come to the University of Rochester should you be admitted. Now, I think there is a misconception that we're going to run out of aid, and so you need to do early decision in order to get aid, and that's not true. We have the budget for both early decision and regular decision international students. If you are admitted, and then you get your aid package, which is going to come approximately 2 weeks after your admissions, because we meet full demonstrated need, you're not able to back out of that agreement because you didn't get the financial aid that you need. So what I would say, and what I say to parents, is that if you were my child, right, and I was concerned about the costs and paying for that, I would not encourage my child to go early decision because it is a binding contract and we do meet full demonstrated need. And I see this question pop up and say, well, what if your financial aid doesn't meet what my family says my need is? Well, again, this goes back to that information that's provided. Now, sometimes the information that's provided is incorrect and we can do a correction. But assuming that all the information that's provided is correct, we are meeting your demonstrated need. Remember, demonstrated need is determined by income, assets, and number in household, not what a family thinks they can pay or want to pay. So those are two very different things that sometimes can be confusing. Jen, what am I missing?
No, that was fantastic. Yeah. You know, and we're continuing to get questions about, you know, how many students get financial aid. And to be honest with you, I can't give you an answer to that because it really varies year to year based on our budget, which does vary year to year based on, you know, just like a family's budget is going to vary year to year based on, you know, perhaps mom or dad lost a job for part of the year, and so they have less money, or maybe you now have grandma living with you, so you need to spend more there. So our budget also changes. And so our budget will change, will impact it. Also, the students, individual students that we admit change it. Again, that example I gave before, with a student who needs $80,000, I could admit one, or I could admit four of those students that needed $20,000, or I could admit two students that needed $4,000, or I could admit, right? Like you can keep, and so we really don't know. I don't have like this year we're going to admit this many students who need aid. I have absolutely no idea how many students we will admit that need aid, because it depends on who those students are. And so it's a very fluid process. And so we just don't know. And I know that's hard and that's frustrating. But I think that the piece to remember is that generally speaking, at most schools, the more aid you need, the stronger of an applicant you need to be. And I think sometimes students think, I just want all the money. I don't maybe need all the money, but I just want all the money, right? Like that's human nature, right? Like I just want all the money. But please know that wanting all the money could make it not possible for you to be admitted at a school. Whereas maybe if you really can afford to pay some of the money, your chances for admission might increase. So it's just something to really keep in mind.
I think too, Jen, I want to just kind of piggyback off of that on the sort of back to this demonstrated need. And it's a good thing for people to keep in mind about financial aid is that we deal in black and white. We don't like what ifs and sort of gray areas. So the information that we need and that we use to determine need is very black and white, which is why we look at 2 years prior income, because we know what you made and we can verify that. And so there's just not a lot of gray area in terms of aid, because it is very concrete. It's not subjective at all. And so I think that's something to keep in mind, that it is based on numbers, and that it's not like, oh, we're going to give them more aid because of this. It's very concrete. Jen asked me what the numbers are, and I can tell her 100% confidence, if the information is correct that I have, this is what the numbers are.
You know, like lots of students ask questions about this COVID situation and how it affected budget. And maybe you can also talk about this situation with deferred students, you know, those kids who had for 2020, but they will join in 2021. Will that affect number of students who will be admitted?
Yeah, so maybe I can speak first about the admissions piece and about our general budget, and Lucinda can talk a little bit about how that might influence financial aid. So we did have more students defer this year. To be honest, the number of students at this point that we have that deferred to fall is not much higher than we would see in a typical year. We always have some students who defer because of mandatory military service in their home country, or because they're taking a year to participate in a gap year program or things like that. We actually deferred most of our students who requested a deferral to start in our spring term, which starts on February 1st. Now, some of them will be able to join us then. Some of them will not. And to be honest, at this point, we just don't know those numbers yet, because, for example, our new Chinese students are still not able to get visas. Now, that could open tomorrow, and they would be able to get visas in time to be here. It's just a little bit too far out at this point, because it is still a number of months until February 1st. So at this point, I'll be honest that I really don't think it's going to impact numbers in terms of numbers of seats that we have available in the class, entering class, or if it does, in a very, very small way. I think the other thing to keep in mind is we don't know what admissions is going to look like this year, right? If you think specifically about our US students, in the past, they'd all be visiting our campus. They would have been visiting our campus all summer long. We have hundreds of students who come in. most days we're quite busy, and that's our main focus of what we do. And then that's what drives many US applications is they come, they have this great visit, they love campus, they apply. Well, we've been closed to visitors since the middle of March. And so to be honest, I think a lot of colleges are in this place that we don't know. Are we going to get more applications because students are applying to more places because they didn't get a chance to visit and they don't know exactly where they want to go? Are we going to see less applications because of the exact same reasons? What is going to be, are some students going to choose not to come to the US that previously would? To be honest, we just don't know. This is the year of anything that's more than a little bit out, I don't know. What's going to happen next month? I don't know. And so, to be honest, we don't really know how the process is going to remain the same. The documents you have to submit, all of that is going to be the same, but how it might impact admission rates, it's just too early to say at this point. Additionally, the same is to be said for budget. Literally tomorrow, today's Thursday, so tomorrow is the date where it's called census date in the US, where we see exactly how many students that we were expecting to come either came to campus or enrolled in our online classes. We'll get a firm number of that. We don't even have that yet, if you think about that, right? And school started about a month and a half ago here. And that's really common. This happens every single year. So to project what the budget will be for next year, we first have to know how much money did we make this year? How much aid did we distribute this year? And that's just for the fall semester. And so even for the spring semester, will some of those international students be able to come that didn't previously come? Those sorts of things are really all impacting that. So if I had to guess, I think our budget will be less next year. I think the budget at many schools will be less next year because it's expensive to put all sorts of new technology in your classrooms because now you need all of your classes to be online, to teach all of your faculty how to be great online teachers, right? Because they've previously only taught in person. All of these things, right? They cost money. And so I think, our hospital here was essentially closed to non-emergencies and COVID cases for weeks and weeks and weeks. And so all of the elective surgeries and minor things that people typically go to a hospital for didn't happen. You lose money, right? And so this is something, obviously, the US economy has had huge impacts. And so I think this will be a budget reality for us at Rochester and at most schools in the US, but it's just too soon to know if it's a small impact, a medium impact, or a large impact. Lucinda, what about, students who might have concerns about changing financial situations for them or their families?
So, I think that, there is always a process of appeals and, special circumstances that come up, right? We know that life doesn't happen in a vacuum and there is a process in place to, if you are admitted, say, regular decision and the aid package wasn't enough and there was a reason, either a loss of job or a death of a parent or a divorce or something like that, where we have a process in place, and that's when you would reach out to me and we would work one-on-one for that process. I think, people that, I think it's too soon to know how COVID is going to play out in terms of aid. We are not doing any COVID related appeals at this point because we don't know how much money we have. The situation is still fluid and it's unfolding. I think that we don't know what the budget is going to be. As far as I know, it's probably going to be the same. We have saved some money because we have students going remotely, but in terms of aid dollars, but I don't think that students really need to get bogged down in that. I think that's where, that information is not going to help them. I think that they need to trust that our process works, our system works, and that regardless of how many students we admit that are international, we're going to put out the best aid packages that we can. and that we are going to meet their need. Now, it may be more competitive, but I think all colleges are going to be more competitive. But I don't think it's helpful for students to get bogged down in, well, what if the budgets go down? I mean, that's just not helpful information. And trust that the work that we do and the process is going to stay the same, and that we are committed to international students on our campus, and we are committed to meeting their demonstrated need and bringing them here and making education at Rochester affordable.
We're coming up on the end of our hour. I don't know if there's any more questions from Education USA or anything that you want to share with students before we wrap up here.
I just wanted to ask this question about handler nomination. I know that it's already available and many school counselors received that information. Can you tell how it will, will it make an applicant stand out, and how many people a school counselor can possibly nominate?
So the Handler program, for those of you who aren't aware of it, is our largest and premier scholarship program at the University of Rochester. That said, it is typically only 1 to 2 international students every year that is named a Handler Scholar. So I would not put too much emphasis on that program. I certainly would not recommend nominating more than 1 student because, again, we are only going to select 1 or 2 international students from everyone who applies. And also, we can self-nominate. So if I see a student while I'm reading their application that I think might be a great fit for that program, I can nominate them as well. So I certainly would only recommend 1 student. And I would really encourage students to think about the fact that we do meet 100% of financial need for all admitted students. So while that program is fantastic and meets students' need as well, and also gives them some additional funding for research and things like that, there are other students who come to the university and actually have a very similar package that they might have through the Handler program and are also able to get a research grant or things like that to support them in additional ways. So I would really, if you just have 1 absolute superstar student, that'd be great to nominate, but to keep in mind that it is highly selective program, and to keep that in mind as you're making those nominations.
Yeah, I do not have any questions, and I actually feel that this session is a bit early in a way that students just started filling out their CSS profiles, and I think today we didn't have any questions related to CSS because students are not really familiar with the form. But it was great, at least you answered all my questions, and you really highlighted those mistakes that international students usually do, US dollars and so on. Thank you a lot. This recording will be available.
Fantastic. Thank you to all of you. We had a great crowd. You guys asked so many fantastic questions. I'd encourage you certainly to reach out to us if you have additional questions, to attend, one of the workshops, if those can be helpful as you're working through your college selection and application process. And I want to thank Lucinda for putting together this fantastic presentation.
Yeah, thanks for having us. And again, feel free to reach out, if there's something that gets you stuck on the CSS profile. You can shoot me an email and I will kind of help you navigate that as well. And thanks for having us, and have a great day or night, I guess.
Have a great night. That's right. We'll have a great day. You have a great night.
Have a good day. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.